Yeah, I'm outside in an AMG, right outside. TT, two-turn baby girl, you know me.
Yo, what's good? It's Josh again with the Black and the Black podcast, where it's always real, where we don't conceal, and where the truth is revealed. And on today's episode, we have another special guest who is one of my biggest inspirations. She's a creative mind, a soulful spirit, a leader, an artist, and of course, my auntie, none other than Miss Holly Bass. How you doing today, Auntie?
I'm doing awesome, Josh. I'm so excited to be on your podcast. You know, I'm like your biggest fan. So this is a huge thrill for me.
Yeah, like we always have so many great conversations. So I figured why not um bring you on, especially in Women's History Month. So um you know how I'm doing, but so first I want to jump straight into it. I want to keep this, because I know you're a busy lady. So tell us, how did you get into journalism?
So journalism, I think, came about, first of all, from my passion for writing and for telling stories. I've always been a writer since I was a young girl. I was writing poems, I was writing essays. I
Mhm.
was writing for like my school newsletter, things like that. Then when I was in college, I went to Sarah Lawrence College, and a
Mhm.
friend and I, we decided to start a magazine called Common Ground. And so we did
Ah,
that while we were in undergrad. Also, we started a literary magazine for students of color called Dark Phrases. We didn't actually start Dark Phrases. We picked up the legacy of Dark Phrases and continued
right.
it. And I found out a couple of years ago that students are still keeping it going. So we had
Mhm.
our annual literary journal. Say that three times fast. And then we
Wow.
had our like quarterly magazine called Common Ground.
Wow. So, what made you go? Okay, because I know you're from California. Listen, you could have went to any other school, but what made you go to Sarah Lawrence?
That's also kind of a great question. I think, I think the spirit of God just led me there. Um, because like growing up in California, I'd never heard of Sarah Lawrence. But in one of my classrooms, there was actually a poster from Sarah Lawrence College, and it said, "A story is a big lie with the truth in the center," or something like that. And I remember reading that poster and being like, man, that's really cool. What is this place? And so looked it up, read about it, learned about it, and it really just felt like it would be an excellent place for me as a young creative person. Some of the things I liked about it, you didn't have to take math classes. So I was like, ooh, okay, that's one, plus in its favor. And then also, you didn't really have to declare a major. You could just explore where your interest led you. And then you would kind of develop your concentration. And it wasn't about grades per se. And so you would meet with your professor. You had one professor who was like a mentor. They called him a Don, him or her, a Don. And so I really appreciated that it wasn't just about, A, B, C grade level, but more about having a conversation, getting notes, getting feedback, being able to design your own um, learning in your courses. So that really
Wow.
appealed to me.
Wow. So, um, you're I tell I people I everybody I know and everybody who knows me, they know I brag on my auntie 24/7. I brag on my family in general because I always say I just come from a great lineage and I come from great people. So, but I want to switch the tone just a tad bit. Um, and speaking on how Sarah Lawrence impacted you, you started out as a journalist and then you just took off from there, right? And so of course I still do research on my own aunt because you got to be professional. But tell us, what led you into going also into spoken word pieces and more so into poetry as well.
So I've always loved poetry, like from a young age. I think I was 6 years old. I remember being about 6 years old when I wrote my first poem.
Mm.
And I think I was in 5th or 6th grade when one of my poems was, like, published in the school newsletter, so I felt like, "Oh, I'm a real author," you know, even from a young age. And also, my amazing parents, your grandparents, were very, very supportive, and so they really encouraged me to keep writing. And then at Sarah Lawrence, I was, hanging out with really great poets, like Malkia Cyril, and we would form these like poetry troops, and we would go visit other colleges and do performances for them. And then, after Sarah Lawrence, I went to journalism school. Again, it was more about my passion for writing and telling stories, and went to Columbia in New York City and still kept doing poetry. So I was always in poetry groups with other young people, particularly other Black poets. And we would travel around and it was just amazing. Like if I got paid, $15 or $20 to read poetry, I was like, wow, I'm doing it big.
So that's amazing, right? So I want to know, like, speaking, because you talked a lot about, your childhood and of course my lovely grandparents. Tell us, what was it like growing up, in that family dynamic?
I mean, it was great. My mom, your grandma, always tells the story how like the kids in the neighborhood called us the Waltons because when the street lights came on, like me and my brothers, we always had to be at home and we ate dinner as a family every night. We talked about our day and what was important to us. So I really feel like I grew up in a very loving and supportive environment. We went to a really great church and we were very involved in that. And so also in the church, that really influenced my creative development because we would have oratory contests or not really contests, but oratory presentations, dancing in church, youth choir. So a lot of creativity, pageants and plays, that kind of thing. So I always felt like I had ways to be creative in school, outside of school, in the community. And it was a wonderful way to grow up.
Mm. Okay, so now I also want to ask you, since we're speaking on family, and of course I know this because like we're super close and stuff. But what was it like being the only girl out of all the siblings, out of you three? What was it like?
Well, I think one of the things that sometimes I would get frustrated is like, the boys would be able to do things that I wasn't allowed to do, so
Mm,
they could stay out later or they have more freedom. Like I definitely feel like, mom and dad were pretty strict with me. And
yeah.
in some ways I felt a little bit like I resented that. But at the same time, I recognized that they were trying to protect me. And
Mm,
so in some ways, I think that made me want to be a strong, independent woman, but
mm.
also it gave me a really good moral foundation.
Wow. Wow. So, speaking on independence, um, where has like your independence taken you? Because the value, I personally believe the value of being independent and being on your own is something that is truly is a treasure, because so many people in our culture, um, and I'll say it. So many people in our culture, they tend to, depend on their parents for certain stuff. But in our family dynamic, we're taught the values of being independent and going after what you want. So tell us, what is that? What is the value of being independent and going after what you want?
I think it's pretty rare, to feel both a strong sense of love and support and
Yeah.
also feel the sense of encouragement to be independent, to pursue your dreams. So I will say one thing, um, mom and dad were really clear. You have a choice when you finish high school. You can either go to college or you can get a job, but you're not staying here. But for me, I felt like in order to achieve my dreams, I kind of needed to leave California. It was like California felt like this very safe bubble. And I definitely felt, for better or for worse, that I would need to go to New York. And New York isn't the, end all be all. But when you're young and you see televisions and movies, you think, oh, I want to be an artist, I gotta go to New York. So that was one thing. But they were like very, very supportive. Even when I finished school, I remember mom just saying, like, I've pursued my dreams. Like her dream was to open a restaurant and to be a chef, and she was able to do that. And she always encouraged me to follow my dreams. But she would say, you got to be practical too, though. You got to pay your rent. You got to have health insurance, take care of your health. And if you can do those things, then we will support you in what you want to pursue.
Got you, got you. So now we're gonna go fast forward some, because we've talked about the value of having great parents, being in a great household, how it's molded you into this beautiful human being, right? And so I know, and based off your work and when you go on internet, if y'all don't know, she got a Wikipedia page. A Wikipedia page. Listen, I don't care what nobody tell me. My aunt is a celebrity, okay? Listen. But anyway, when you go on the internet, it says she is a cave. I don't know if I'm saying this right, but a Cave Canam Foundation fellow, and her poems and essays and articles have been published in numerous publications, including the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and Beltway Poetry. Tell us, and hold on. And in 1999, she was the first person to use the term hip hop theater in print. Like, that's iconic. So tell us, like, Auntie, when you think of um, the plethora of outlets that you have been able to work with, what give us a reflection of that?
I just feel really blessed, that I've had these opportunities. And I think a lot of it's about relationships. You can be the smartest person, the most talented person, but if you're not able to build relationships with people, I don't know that they're going to be willing to put you on as much as if you have that connection or bond or you have that integrity. I think that's really the main thing that's enabled me to have the kind of career that I've had. It's not just being able to like deliver on deadline or, write beautifully, but also to be the kind of person that supports other people and that people want to support.
That's amazing. So I mentioned you were the first person in 1999 to use the term hip hop theater in print. Tell us, give us a short story behind that, because I want to know. I don't know that, so tell us.
Sometimes you're doing something that is, in your words, iconic, and you don't actually even realize it at the time. So, I was very involved in early hip hop theater movement in New York City. I was one of the programmers for the New York City Hip Hop Theater Festival that was started by Danny Hawk, along with Clyde Valentine and Camila Forbes, who's now the artistic director of the historic Apollo Theater. But at the time, we were all like in our 20s, maybe early 30s, just trying to put a festival on with the people whose work we liked. We wanted to reach our generation, our audiences. And I think at that time I had been doing some freelancing for American Theater Magazine. I don't know if I pitched them or they pitched me, but I was like, this is important. It's not just a flash in the pan. Hip hop theater is a really important movement. So when I got the assignment, I just wrote the article because I thought it was interesting. I didn't realize that I was actually the first journalist to use that term until later.
Wow, wow. I'm like, I when I say like I learn new stuff every day, I really mean it, because I didn't know this, but it's so like when I say it's so great to especially to have the last name Bass. Like, it sounds funny, and I'm gonna tell you a quick story. I was in about seventh grade. I think I may have told you this, and I was on the playground, and also no, also senior year basketball at Rains. We were playing in the game, and we were out of town, and they had their student section. It was a Friday night, and the student section, they were like, Joshua Bass, York, you can fill in the rest. And so I was like, you know what? Why did I have his last name? But when I look at you and I look at Granddaddy Bass, and I even look at my dad's life, I'm I can honestly say like it's it's like a fulfillment to just have that legacy, and then to be the next one up to carry on the legacy. It's like I'm so excited. But I also noticed that you wrote and performed the one person dance piece, Diary of a Baby Diva. First, tell us what was behind that name. What's behind the name Baby Diva?
Yeah, so I don't know if it was, I guess it was the 90s, maybe the late 80s. There was a movie called Three Men and a Baby.
Mm,
And when I first moved to DC, I moved into this shared group house with three men. And then they would jokingly call me their baby diva. And so that's how the joke started. It was three men and a baby diva. And so I was writing reflection, like being in New York City and like going out to clubs and dancing and hanging out with like some of my gay friends or just my club friends. And so it was Diary of a Baby Diva.
mm. Okay. All right now. Diary of a Baby Diva. You know, gotta add the little southern dialect on there, I guess. The baby diva. But man, so um now we're gonna fast forward even more to 2018. You wrote and performed, which is now playing live, and I just saw it yesterday. The Transatlantic Time Traveling Company, which is about a sisterhood of three women who time travel from the present to the 1860s when they become freed women in quest of what it means to be free. Now, that, Auntie, in a nutshell, that sounds deep and like so serious. But when I'm watching it, it was also a joyful play. So tell us, what was your inspiration behind making this piece and how has it impacted your life?
Sure. I mean, I think a lot of people are surprised to know that I'm a really big Star Trek fan. And I love all kinds of sci-fi. With Star Trek, you have in the original series a character like Lieutenant Uhura, who was played by Nichelle Nichols, and it was always powerful to me to see this Black woman who was, not just an assistant but a lieutenant in the future, right?
Mm,
And it's important that we make sure that we see images of ourselves in the future and that we can imagine a better future than our present day. So that's kind of where the science fiction part comes in, or some people call it Afrofuturism. And so that was a big part of what inspired me.
okay. So do you think I do want to know because my personal belief is it should be traveling. Do you have plans or hopes of this play traveling somewhere?
Yeah, that would be amazing. I mean, I would love that. And there's different ways to go about it, right? Like sometimes you put together a troupe of people and the troupe travels, but also as a playwright, the script exists. So there might be, a theater company on the other side of the country that wants to put together their own production with their own cast of performers and a director and a set design. So I absolutely hope that this play, continues to have a life beyond this particular moment. But I'm really proud of what we've been able to create so far at Theater Alliance, which is in historic Anacostia in Washington, D.C.
Of course, we love DC. We love it. Um, I do want to take a moment to recognize something, right? Because I've personally still been dealing with it for a long time. And earlier in the show, we talked about um, the value of family and the reflections. And so um, I want you to talk about you know my father, your brother, um, and what he meant to your life. And then I'm also go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, um, I always say David was one of the smartest people that I've ever met. And he was the kind of smart where um, it was like he was so smart he would get bored easily. So sometimes, like people looked at me and they said I was smart because I was so studious, with my little
Sure.
glasses and reading books all the time, but I had to really, really study hard to get high grades. And David would like just roll up, like he'd skip class and then he'd just roll up, take the test and get an A because it was all up in here. Like we heard it once, he could register it. And so I, sometimes when I think about David, I think about the way our society doesn't always value young Black men and doesn't always give them outlets. And so I think about, all of the young geniuses that like maybe get caught up in drugs or get caught up, in the drug trade or doing other things because they don't have a lot of outlets for their genius, for their entrepreneurial vision, and the tragedy of that. But yeah, I mean, it was just like really smart and funny and cool and a really unique thinker. And so that's something that I value a lot. And I think about him, and like what he would say, like would he enjoy, I know he would really love the Transatlantic Time Traveling Company.
He definitely
They'd
would.
be like, yes, sis. I could just imagine him like seeing it and what he would say. And it makes me feel good inside.
Yeah. For me, looking back, I know because we talk often, especially like with my career, what I'm doing, the podcast. If you guys don't know, some of this stuff like I learned from my aunt with this podcast stuff. When I tell you when I first came into it, I was so clueless, but now like I got a whole new setup around me. I'm learning so much day by day. So of course I credit to my family and of course my aunt. But for far as my dad, taking a reflection back to my very first episode, I want to say we're like 7 episodes in now, and we've done great. But the reason that I started the podcast, well, if anybody doesn't know, I was majoring in biology when I first got to Morehouse, and I was trying to figure out what in the world was going on with my dad, and this, and I wanted to become a neurologist, but I realized that it wasn't my true passion. That storytelling was, and that inspiring people was my true passion, and just inspiring one person one day. And so when we got this podcast started, I named the first episode For the Fathers, and that episode was directly to like acknowledge the people who have helped me along the journey, but also like give a reflection of who my father was. So many times we miscredit people who suffer from different things, but the man was a genius, flat out, a genius. Like I never seen anyone just break down math so simple. And while people may say, "Oh, that's such a small story," the significance of it to me as a young boy was so fundamental because I was sitting back and I was just watching my dad, like, and he was just breaking the problem down right in front of me, like it was in his hand, like he could do it without even studying. And I'm like you stated, and when I started this, everything like I try to do is just to continue to honor his legacy and make sure that he can look down and be proud. And so, with this podcast, that's the real thing behind it. Like that's why another reason we named it Blacker Than Black, because I wanted to um, amplify what it means to be blacker than black. Because so many times they tell black people that we're nothing and that we're trash and that we don't belong. But as my grandma would say, black is royalty, black is beautiful. And so um, that's why we named it this, and to honor my dad's legacy. And that's why I wanted to take time to reflect on that because, like I said, he's played such a fundamental part in both of our lives. And it's great to be a part of that. So, Auntie, um, before we leave, because I actually no, we're gonna switch it up. I got a question. I got a really good question. Who in right now in the world of journalism, um, especially when we've been a journalism student, who in the world would you just say is a great journalist?
Um,
Mm,
I think Mark Lamont Hill really impresses me pretty consistently, um, especially his coverage on Palestine right now. And I really appreciate how, folks will come on there and just try to say anything,
yeah,
say things that are false, say things that are misleading. And he'll just get in there and be like, wait a minute, you're trying to say this. I need the facts. Where's your evidence? Where's the source?
yeah,
I remember this one clip where um, this guy was saying, well, when's the last time you were in Palestine? And Mark was like, a year ago or something like that. And the guy was just like, because he wasn't expecting that answer. He was expecting him to be like, oh, I've never been to Palestine. But he had receipts. And so
Mm,
I feel like he's always bringing receipts. And I really respect that, especially right now.
yeah, that's amazing. Speaking before we go now, since you brought that up, I want to know your thoughts on the situation on Palestine, if it's okay, if you want to discuss that.
Yeah, I'm happy to discuss that.
Okay, okay.
I mean, it's, so many people that I respect, and that I have either followed and read their books or know personally have been talking about what's happening in Palestine and Gaza for years, like for decades. So, people like Angela Davis, Alice Walker, people like Ta-Nehisi Coates. And I personally haven't been to Israel or Palestine. But for all of these folks to say, oh, yeah, this is segregation, it's apartheid, it looks exactly like, Mississippi in the 1950s. And then to now be at this point where, you know, tens of thousands of Palestinian men, women, and children are being killed with American bombs by the Israeli nation. And it's not helping the Israeli hostages, and it's devastating the Palestinian people. So that's something for me. I think, we all need to be aware of what's happening in the world and understand how all of our liberation and freedom is connected, right?
Right.
So I think it's Ella Baker who talks about my freedom is, directly intertwined with other people's freedom. And so as a Black person who is very, socially aware, or I try to be socially aware, I can't help but see a parallel between how Black people are treated in America and what's happening, with the Palestinian people.
Wow. I totally agree. Um, it's such a tragedy. Um, it the world, to me, the world shouldn't be like this. The world needs peace. That's what it really needs. Um, and hopefully, with this episode, maybe we'll bring peace to one person's life.
Yeah, you have to start small, right? Like
Yeah.
you influence the people who are near you. We can't, the two of us alone can't
Yeah.
create a ceasefire, but
Right.
maybe someone listening to this podcast will go and they'll do some research, they'll learn, they'll decide to make different choices for themselves. And that matters. That makes a difference.
Exactly. So now, before we go, we do this thing on Blacker Than Black. I'm sure you know. We ask our guests to leave one piece of inspirational advice to take into this next week. So, what's your inspirational advice?
My inspirational advice to take into this next week is to find something that brings you joy and to do that thing and to share that thing with someone else.
Mm,
So I think a lot of us who consider ourselves, socially conscious or activists, we're always like trying to fight the system or change the rules. But we have to remember why we're trying to fight the system and change the rules so that we can actually live in a more just and joyous society and culture. So I just encourage everyone to find something that really brings you true joy and inner peace and to share that with someone else.
amazing. Pay it forward. Now I'm gonna give mine. So when I was on the way to DC, um, I was watching everything like I always do, and I've been on the plane all the time, but for some reason this one was different, and so I took a note. I said, when the plane takes off, you can see the cars on the ground and all the slight movement around you because you're at the airport. Um, but when you are completely up, it's nothing but clouds. That's because you are going beyond all of the movement around the world. And when it's time for you to come back down to earth, you have seen more than what you saw on the ground the first time. And so basically with this, um, I personally believe, because I always talk about God. First time God takes you through something, he takes you through the clouds. So that way he could take you into his world a little more. So you can see things in his eyes, his point of view. so you can mold in his image. And when you come back down to earth, you're prepared now. You see things a little differently. You're more advanced. You're more equipped with warfare in your back pocket. So you're able to articulate yourself better. You're able to translate things better and believe in yourself even more than you did when you first took off. So in this next week, I'm encouraging someone and encouraging myself too to take off, go in the clouds, go see things beyond the clouds. Even if you're in your room, as my Uncle Larry would say, I'm going to just go look up at the ceiling. Because what's better than looking up at the ceiling? You get peace, you find happiness, and you find joy. So, with that being said, I want to say thank you, Auntie, for coming on today. It was such a pleasure having you here. I also want to say thank you to the audience that is listening. Even if you've been rocking with us from day one or you just stopped by today, I want to say thank you. But it has been a pleasure to be with you guys again. And this has been Josh with the Blacker Than Black podcast, where it's always real, where we don't conceal. And today, the truth was revealed. I'll see y'all next time, and I love y'all. Peace.